welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 154 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today, we'll be discussing chapter 10 of A Storm of Swords, that's Davos 2.
And as always, we're going to chat about the chapter. We're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we're going to provide you some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some relevant news and listener correspondence. Be sure to check out the show notes, they'll provide some additional information about the characters and other things of notes in this chapter. How are you, Mackelly?
I'm doing fine. It's good to see your face. You were missing this morning.
Yes, we were supposed to record this morning and I had a lie-in, which was very strange. I never set an alarm because I have two dogs that are an alarm clock, but Penny's a little under the weather and she let me sleep in. So I missed it. I do apologise. It
happens. I'm glad you got to sleep in. I know you don't get to do that often. So
yeah, almost never. It's weird. So I played soccer today for my new team. I have moved up a division at soccer. You might have misunderstood what I meant by that. I've moved into an older.
Yes, I thought that might have been what you meant.
And I've discovered I can't tell my teammates apart because I don't wear my glasses when I'm playing soccer, so everything's just a little bit blurry, and they're all just slightly pudgy grey-haired people. They all blend into one. I'm like, I don't know who you are.
No, they're interchangeable parts at this point.
The other thing that happened was I was subbed out for a while because we had 5 subs, so we were all taking turns being sub, and I was sitting on the end of the bench and the coach said, "All right, you two get up," and the 2 guys on the bench with me got up and the bench sort of lifted up because I was sitting on the end of it.
He was like, "You need to get in there." Oh, that's unfortunate timing right there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well. Did you guys win at least?
No, we lost. I went onto the field and we were 2-1 up. And about 10 minutes later, we were 5-2 down. I was like, oh, man.
Was this your debut?
This is my debut for them. I have played a couple of times as a guest player, but now I'm fully in that team. It was my first time as a full-time player.
Well,
not the best.
There's only one way to go from there, it sounds like.
Exactly. It's a shame, actually, because it was kind of, in many ways, it was the season decider, because it's the best, we're the 2 best teams.
Okay.
And we met in just the second game of the season, and we blew it.
Oh, well. You'll get them next time, Tiger.
We will. I think we play them twice, so we'll have a chance at revenge.
All right, good. Not much going on with me. I was out on the lake today. You know, I was thinking about it because I was thinking, did anything interesting happen to me this week? Not that I want to talk about on a public forum like this anyway. And I was like, oh no, it just came from the lake, and I was like, I feel like we misrepresent ourselves. It's like boat. Boat people, neither of us even own a boat. We just happen to know people who own boats and sometimes get invited out on those boats.
And let me tell you, careful listener, that's the way to do it.
It is.
Those people have a lot of responsibilities with that whole boat thing.
Oh, no kidding.
I watch them work on that, and I'm like, I would never do this. If I got a boat, I would never use it because of the whole rigmarole getting it
right.
in the water.
You'd think about all the steps ahead of time and be like, nah, next weekend.
But yeah, God bless them. It's great to have friends with boats.
It sure is. It's the best way to have a boat, really.
All right, well, let's get down to business. How did we leave Davos? Last we saw of Davos Seaworth. I've just had a mental fart there. Is his last name Seaworth?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it just didn't seem right. While we're editing something out, I was on a call with someone yesterday who said the word, I'm going to spell it, and you have to think about it, INWARD.
Inward. Okay.
And I heard N-WORD.
Do we have to edit that out?
And I was like, what did
Oh, inward. Right,
inward.
Internal. Right.
And it reminded me of, there's a running joke in Arrested Development. Have you ever seen Arrested Development?
I have, yep.
Their boat is called the SEAWARD. The C word. There's a running joke. They're saying C-word.
Right. Good stuff.
Yes. So last we saw of Davos Seaworth, he was washed up on a tiny island in the middle of Blackwater Bay, having miraculously avoided the wildfire conflagration that certainly claimed 4 of his sons. He had no idea how the battle had ended, but when a ship pulls up, he announces for King Stannis and is taken aboard as a friend. Mackelly, why don't we give the summary of this one?
A sick and weak Davos stands on deck aboard Shayala's dance, as Dragonstone comes into view in the distance. His thoughts are consumed by the red woman Melisandre. He thinks Melisandre has broken Stannis to her will and now plans to ride him to power, his sons' lives being the cost of her ambition. For that, he plans to cut out her heart and burn it, as she burned his sons.
His reputation as the Onion Knight has allowed him a certain level of celebrity on the ship, to the point where Captain Corain Sathmantes has given Davos his own cabin to use. The captain filled Davos in on some events that have taken place while Davos was marooned. He learned about Stannis' bannermen leaving him during the fight to join the Lannister-Tyrell cause, led by Randy Baratheon's Shade. That the Lysene ships took as many of Stannis' men as they could off land, including many from House Florent, and that Lord Alester Florent is now Stannis' Hand of the King.
As they dock in the Dragonstone harbor, Davos notices how empty it is, filled primarily with the striped Lysene ships of his buddy Salladhor Saan. It's Saan that the captain plans to take him to first. Davos only has designs on seeing the king and a certain red woman, but the captain insists and Davos is too weak and sick to argue. They find Saan taking inventory in the hold of a Pentoshi cog.
The Lysene pirate can hardly believe his eyes at the sight of Davos. After a bear hug, Saan, or Sala, as Davos calls him, has Davos escorted to the captain's cabin for food and hot wine to help with Davos's unsettling cough. When Saan joins Davos, he explains he's acquired the ship because he's now the Lord of Blackwater Bay by decree of Alester Florent, Hand of the King. Any ships on the water without Saan's leave are smugglers.
Saan confirms that Davos' son Dale and Allard did not return from the river. However, his son Devon did make it off land safe and sound, having never left King Stannis' side. Davos is dizzy with relief. Saan offers Davos a ship to visit his wife and other young sons on Cape Wrath, provided Davos return to his smuggling ways and work for him.
Davos thanks him for his kindness, but says his place is with the king. Saan tells Davos the king has changed since the battle. He sees no one but Melisandre. His court is kept by Queen Selyse and her uncle Alester the Hand. The pair use the king's seal to make whatever decisions they see fit into rulings without consulting the king. Meanwhile, the king and Melisandre spend their days deep in the volcano, watching the flames.
Davos tells Saan it's Melisandre's fault the fire consumed them on the Blackwater, as punishment for Stannis sending her back to Dragonstone, a lesson for Stannis that he can't win without her and her powers. Saan says Davos isn't the first to say such things, but he shouldn't be saying them loudly. The Queen's men have sharp ears and sharper knives. Davos has a knife too, and he plans to use it on Melisandre, if she can be killed.
Salladhor begs Davos to rest and recuperate here with him. His talk is dangerous. While the men were burning on the Blackwater, the Queen was burning traitors. But Davos won't be deterred. He's sent by the mother. It was her that blew Shayala's dance so close to the spears of the Merling King to rescue him. The two part ways acrimoniously.
Davos makes his way to the castle, where he's asked to wait in a garden. While waiting, he runs into Princess Shireen and the fool Patchface, and literally runs into another boy that accompanies the pair. The boy has the eyes, hair, and face of a Baratheon, but with the ears of a Florent. Davos recognizes him at once as Edric Storm, the nephew of King Stannis and bastard son of King Robert. The boy worries over Davos' cough, and when he learns who Davos is, asks to see his shortened fingers.
Upon inspection, the boy determines the job ill done. Davos saved Stannis and his people with his smuggling. He shouldn't have been punished for his past deeds. His father wouldn't have punished him in such a way. At that moment, Axel Florent arrives with a dozen other Queen's men. Davos asks if he's taking him to the king. Axel says on the contrary, he's taking Davos to the dungeon. He commands the men take Davos's knife. He planned to kill their lady with it.
Ruh-roh.
I like this chapter. I thought it moved things along a little bit. I mean, I was worried that Davos was going to sort of spend a lot of time recuperating, but, he threw himself back into this pretty quickly.
He did, much to Salladhor Saan's dismay.
Right, yeah. Also, I like the sort of evolution of the whole Florence taking some control over Team Stannis. I think that's an interesting development.
Sure.
While Stannis becomes more withdrawn and more focused on what Melisandre is seeing. I do think my overarching feeling about the chapter is, though, a sort of simmering injustice against Melisandre. The poor woman was sidelined. She can't be the one to blame. Yeah. It's not her fault.
He's definitely become a bit obsessed. He's literally, everything he sees reminds him of Melisandre. He sees a fire atop a tower at sharp point, and it reminds him of the ruby at her throat. He sees the red clouds at dawn and at sunset, and it reminds him of the red gowns that she wears. And he's absolutely convinced she's to blame for all their bad fortune.
Right. But she definitely helped them. I mean, possibly by dabbling in magic she should not have dabbled in, but she definitely helped them get to the point where they had a chance.
Yeah, sure.
My God, without her, they'd still be camping in front of Storm's End for another couple of years,
Yes. Or Renly's army would have run them over that very morning before when he was killed.
The other, just a quick aside, the other thing I noticed is the name of the ship, Shayala's Dance. It's kind of like a portmanteau, if you will, of the names of, pushing two words together.
Okay, yeah. Fancy word right there.
Of Tyrion's lover, and also of the woman who was used as a decoy to protect his lover. Shayala.
Shayala. Oh,
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I had not thought of that.
I mean, it's probably just completely random, but when I read it, I thought, oh, that's kind of like their two names. Shay and Alayaya, right?
Right, yeah. Maybe Tyrion would have named a ship as such.
Right. Although, Shay comes across to me as someone who wouldn't want her name munged with another woman's.
Oh,
even if she owed a debt to that other woman.
Yeah, I could see that.
Tyrion's biggest ship could be Shay, and he could have like a little dinghy called Alayaya.
He owes her that much at least.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, so like you're saying, Davos, he is completely focused on Melisandre as being the force behind all this stuff. He thinks, as we mentioned in the summary, that she, being Melisandre, broke him, being Stannis, as a man breaks a horse, and now plans on riding him to power. And for that, she gave my sons to the fire. It just constantly, everything that's talked about turns to, this is Melisandre's fault.
Yeah, but he does hark back to his sort of like his come to the mother moment on the Merlin King's spears, where he feels like she spoke to him and said, the reason you failed is because Melisandre destroyed our religion.
Yeah,
exactly. So I think it's I do think he's had sort of this road to Damascus moment where he's begun to think she's evil, she's fighting our gods, and our gods have paid us back. And so we need to get rid of her.
Yes.
And that kind of thinking doesn't always need evidence to back it up.
Right. I agree. And so another thing that I like the way you said his name, Cohorain Sathmantes. You said it you had quite a nice little flair on it.
I don't listen to the book, so I have to sort of.
I liked your version of it. He tells him Davos about how the battle ended on the Battle of the Blackwater, and that Stannis and many of the Florent men were taken off land onto the ships, including Davos' son Devon, and that a lot of Stannis' newly acquired bannermen that came over to him from Renly turned on Stannis when they saw Renly's ghost. Now we've heard about this before in other chapters about this Renly's ghost concept. We've heard it over a span of many chapters, and we've seen no evidence that Renly is still living. So it seems pretty obvious that it's some kind of trick that the Tyrells and Lannisters played. It doesn't require a great deal of setup. Basically, someone who fits into Renly's armor and can wield a sword and ride a horse. You get those components, you got yourself Renly's shade. Because, I mean, first of all, Koharang could be wrong, but he says that that this Renly shade led the Lannister vanguard. Now, we know Loras Tyrell led the Tyrell vanguard, so why would Renly be fighting alongside the Lannisters, and where is he gone?
Right, yes. Yeah, it does feel like they pulled a subterfuge, but I mean, it was quite clever, because Renly's death was always shrouded in sort of like mystery, and sort of like there was a sort of, I mean, we know it was Melisandre's magic that caused it, but to those who didn't witness it, there was this sense that there was something magical occurred. And then, so for his ghost to come back, well, that kind of fits with the narrative, and so you could definitely turn some people who were, well, we'll move over to Stannis' side, but that's only because our lord was killed, as soon as they see him again, well, that could flick the switch back. So it was a smart move by the Lannisters. But yeah, I gotta say, your interpretation is exactly my interpretation. Stick a big guy in this armor and pretend he's Renly.
Yes, right. It seems pretty clear at this point there's something like that going on. It seems it wasn't Loras, because Loras is said to have been leading a different vanguard and not dressed as Renly Baratheon. So we'll have to see who it might have been. Or maybe it was, maybe they just channeled his ghost for that one battle.
Good point. Definitely possible. I mean, they brought an other down, for one special. So, one thing I will say actually is I get my vision of Loras and Renly is somewhat influenced by the TV show, and I see that as we've been reading the book, I always thought that Loras was a candidate for the one wearing it, because obviously you don't want this person to get killed very easily, so he needed to have some skills.
Right.
So Loras was a good candidate in that respect, because he's about as good a swordsman as you could have. But I think the book makes it clear that Loras is actually kind of like, Loras is fairly well represented in the TV show as a sort of willowy, thin fella, whereas Renly was shown in the TV show as about the same size as Loras, but he's a Baratheon, and they're big dudes. They are big and strong, the Baratheons. So he wouldn't have been a physical fit in this respect. And as you say, we actually know he was fighting in a different place, so it makes no sense. But then again, it makes no sense that Renly's ghost fought. So,
so who knows? We'll have to wait and see if this is revealed in due time.
It must be at this point, because it's been mentioned so many times. It feels like it would be like sort of like leaving us in the dark if you never tell us how the heck that happened. Right.
Like who tried to kill Bran? Who paid the cat's paw to try and kill Bran? We better find out who that is at some point.
Right.
So Saan, when Davos goes to meet Salladhor Saan, at first Salladhor doesn't even believe he's seeing his friend Davos, and then he accepts that it really is Davos. And he tells him that Dale and Allard unfortunately did not survive. There was 2 other sons that also died in the fire, but they weren't mentioned. And that Devon did survive. And then he tells him, yeah, I will give you a ship to go visit your wife and your other 2 young sons, Stannis and Steffan. But, and the other good part is, hey, you and I can go into business together again, and you can do some smuggling for me. And, Davos turns it down. But basically because he's obsessed with this concept that he has to kill Melisandre. He says it's my duty is to my king, but really his focus is just all about. He doesn't even expect to survive, I don't think, killing Melisandre.
Yeah, and the offer is not just a sort of return to his smuggling days, because Salladhor Saan has been sort of like made, what was he, Lord of Blackwater, and so he now patrols the seas, and anyone who's not paying tribute to Stannis is considered a smuggler, and basically it's sort of legalized pirating.
Yes, yes, it is.
Basically, and so it's actually right up both of their alleys. They both really enjoy it, But you're absolutely right. He's not interested, and to a certain extent, I mean, I think 99% of this is the fact that he's become obsessed with this idea of getting revenge. But I think the 1% of it is he's become a trusted advisor to the king.
Right.
He doesn't want to go back to his old life.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. But it seems like Saan is trying to give him an alternative path. Now, of course, he's also looking at his own benefit. He knows that Davos was a successful smuggler and would love him back on board. But I also think he's trying to redirect him to another path here. Yeah. Theoretically, he probably, no one else knows he survived at this point. He could, if he wanted to, take him up on this offer. Probably no one would ever find out that he survived. And Stannis has got a lot bigger fish to fry, so, it would be a long time before Stannis might be in position to retaliate to Davos for, being alive and not coming back to him.
That being said, certainly at the time when he had this offer on the table and could think about that, you're right. There would be an expectation. If you were given a ship and you went off to Cape Wrath and you saw your family, Stannis might never discover that you were alive. However, later on in the chapter, we do learn that the Florents have ears everywhere, and so news of his survival is going to reach them for sure.
Yes, that's true. That seems possible.
So, why... I mean, Salladhor explains what he's doing, this sort of legalized piracy. It is kind of, again... We often hear about Stannis being incorruptible and very moral, but this is somewhat immoral. I mean, basically, it's piracy. But then again, at the same time, if you consider yourself the king, then you are owed the taxes of these trade fleets. And but I mean, he's showing more moral flexibility than it was ever suggested he had.
If he knows. Because it was Alester Florent, Hand of the King, that signed the parchment. So Stannis might not even know that this agreement has happened. Now, you can understand why Stannis's council would need to figure out some way to pay Salladhor Saan, because his fleet is the only fleet they have left, basically. So they need to keep him around just so they have some way of getting off of the island if they need to.
Yeah, true enough. And also, I think there's also the potential for this to expand your fleet. I mean, if you impound these ships and you bring them in, then you've got more ships. Yeah.
And this whole plan here will work fine right now because the royal fleet was destroyed as badly as Stannis' fleet.
Yeah.
But when the Red Wine fleet comes up around the southern end of Westeros, it's going to be a different story.
Yeah. So the one thing we didn't mention in the recap is that the ship that they're on belonged to Illyrio Mopatis. They mention it because the chair that I think Salladhor is sitting in.
I think they both. Davos sits in a chair when he first gets there and thinks, three of me could fit in this chair comfortably. Right. And then Salladhor comes in and says, the chairs were fit to Illyrio Mopatis' size.
Right.
So he calls him a whale with whiskers.
Right.
But, yeah, speaking of this being Illyrio's ship, he's gotten a good deal poorer in the last few chapters. He's lost this ship here, Bountiful Harvest, on the heels of the 3 ships he sent to Dany and everything they contain. Now, it's assuming we assume he probably will get those 3 ships back if Dany goes by land, like Jorah proposes. But the goods inside the ship, those are a different matter.
Well, the goods inside those ships have been converted, or will be converted into an army of Unsullied. Illyrio could say, is that my army? 'Cause
Right.
I feel like I paid for it.
I feel like I paid for that army. Although this whole thing does prove Jorah's point that the trip back to Pentos is dangerous whether you go by land or sea. They could end up being caught by someone else or by one of Salladhor's people.
But it does feel like he's basically patrolling the waters leading back to King's Landing.
Yeah, just in the Blackwater.
Yeah.
Just
Which
in
is,
the bay.
I mean, strategically, that's a good idea because obviously you could sort of gain intel on sort of comings and goings and also perhaps, help to harry and prevent too much reinforcement reaching King's Landing by water. Although, is there any real prospect here of Stannis getting back to King's Landing? It feels like
not anytime soon. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So eventually, like you said, once the Red Wines arrive, this becomes a losing proposition for Salladhor. But I think Salladhor is nimble enough to get himself out of there rather than fight to the death.
I would think so. And, like you were saying about Stannis earlier regarding the morality of this whole legalized pirating. So Davos is told of how Stannis' men deserted him when the Lannister Tyrell forced attack. We just mentioned that a few minutes ago. And, Stannis gets grief for this rigid, unforgiving nature of his, and we gave him credit for seeing the need to forgive the lords who backed Renly and then came to him when Renly died. But it turns out he would have been better off if he either just told him to, send them packing or, lop their heads off or something, because he didn't get a whole lot out of that army in the first place. They pretty much bailed on him as the first sign of Renly's armor.
It's very true. It's a good interview question. If your former lord were to come back to life, would you go back to work for him?
Right. He did not ask that question clearly.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's and I wonder if that might make him more rigid again in the future. Like,
yes, he's burned.
See what it cost me to do that. Yeah,
good point.
So Salladhor knows that Devon is alive. He was one of the people that got rescued because he stayed by Stannis' side, so that he would have noticed. You'd like to think that this would dissuade Davos from his murderous path against Melisandre, but it most certainly does not.
No, and Salladhor Saan brings up the fact that he's just adding to the grief of his wife and remaining children by getting himself killed here.
Yeah, because as he said, whether you succeed or fail, the outcome is you're going to get killed.
Right.
No two ways about it.
Yeah.
But Stannis has sort of got this enforced absence going on, which has allowed his wife, Queen Selyse, and her uncle, Alester Florent, to basically take over. And this is troubling. I mean, this is troubling when your reign is crumbling. To allow a powerful house to sort of take the reins is probably ill-advised.
Yes, right. For a man on the brink, it seems like a bad idea. And, he just doesn't seem like the type of guy who would be asleep at the wheel at this moment. But clearly he's distracted by whatever's going on in the bowels of the volcano. Now, real quick, so there's two Florents that are mentioned in this chapter, and just to keep them separate, Alester Florent is the Lord of Brightwater Keep and head of House Florent.
Right.
He backed Renly at first, but since his death has become a huge supporter of R'hllor and Stannis as well, I guess. And he was with Stannis when he parlayed with Courtney Penrose at Storm's End. Axel Florent is the other uncle. He's the one that's been around on Dragonstone for ages. He's the Castellan of Dragonstone when Stannis isn't around. So there's Axel and there's Alester. So just two separate uncles of Selyse. Just wanted to try and keep them straight for people.
I you know what, Mackelly? I'm glad you said that because I literally don't think I even noticed. They were both A. Florence.
Right, yes.
I didn't even... I'm not sure I even noticed that we were talking about two different people. So Salah tells Davos that while we were burning on the river, the Queen was burning traitors. And that's sort of... There were two ways that this sort of like... This coup of the Florence over Stannis could have gone. One was to return him back to maybe a more conventional path. He's dabbling with dark magic. The other way was to impose their own will, and their own will isn't great. And unfortunately, they've definitely chosen path B there because they are burning those that they see as traitors. And of course, what is a traitor when you've got a king who's withdrawn and a rival faction taking power? Everyone could be a traitor. Just depends on how you look at it. There's no way to keep everybody happy with your actions.
Anyone who disagrees or questions them suddenly becomes a traitor.
Exactly. Or, and they could have it both ways. If the person says, I'm just agreeing with the king, they can burn them as a traitor for not doing what they want. If you agree with them, you can say, well, you're doing what the king didn't want. So it's it's a bad situation.
It is. Now, so he mentions Davos thinks to himself, I knew it. I knew you were going to say that before you even said it. They burnt Lord Sunglass and Hubbard Rampton's sons. Now, so Lord Gunter Sunglass he was known to be pious. We learned that in the Clash of Kings prologue. And after they burned the statues of the Seven, he went to Stannis and said he couldn't support Stannis any longer because they went into the Sept, took the statues out and burnt them. And he was thrown in the dungeon for that. And then Hubbard Rampton, he's a knight who, along with his 3 sons, tried to defend the Sept on Dragonstone from the Queen's men when they went in to try and remove those statues to burn them. And Rampton and one of his sons were killed, and the other 2 were imprisoned in a dungeon. And then Septon Bear was also arrested at that time. He's the Septon on Dragonstone. We don't know if he was burned alongside these other ones, but that's who Davos is talking about was burned as traitors.
Yeah. And, I mean, we're just talking about humans being burnt as if it's nothing, but just occasionally I let my mind wander to the atrocity that is, and it is awful. It's absolutely awful.
Absolutely.
And I mean, and it's also, you've got that sort of 1984 thing hanging over this, because I mean, like, just everybody on Dragonstone is just going to be terrified of what awaits them if they do something wrong, and not knowing how not to do something wrong.
Exactly, right. It's very unclear. Unless you walk around praising R'hllor on a 24/7 basis, you run a chance of doing something you didn't even know was violating the rules.
Yeah, and then you get into the sort of the witchcraft kind of thing of the only way to get your own innocence is to bring somebody else down, sort of, so you start pointing the finger. And
true, yeah.
It's bad.
Although it does seem, Sala kind of indicates that he doesn't believe Stannis has knowledge of these kind of atrocities that are being done in his name. And it reminded me a little bit of the Robb Stark Roose Bolton thing, where in both situations, a subordinate is making decisions and taking actions that the king might not approve of because the king is somewhere else and trusting this subordinate to handle things in his name. So we don't know. I mean, we don't know whether Stannis is aware of these things or not, but the way that Sala explains it, it sounds like it's possible he doesn't know.
Yeah.
Because he won't even, I don't think we mentioned this specifically in the summary, but Stannis won't even meet with his wife and daughter.
Yeah, just Melisandre, basically. And
yeah. Right.
Presumably people who bring them sandwiches to toast over the volcano.
I think he mentions that food is brought and left uneaten. So they're not even doing that. Yeah. But yes, if he's not meeting with Selyse, he's certainly also not meeting with Alester Florent. So he probably doesn't know that these things are happening in his own tiny little kingdom that's now one island.
But there is a sentence that makes you think Melisandre is aware, because she's said to sing when the fires were lit for these traitors, or as she calls them, servants of the dark. She categorizes, and I mean, this is absolutely from the textbook of tyrants. She categorizes everybody as being part of them or against them, kind of thing, and then it justifies whatever you want.
Right.
And so if she at least seems to be aware, Stannis, we have no idea how withdrawn he is, but he's doing nothing to stop it, that's for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, so Davos, again, he said that the fire was sent to consume us by Melisandre. So he's actually blaming Melisandre for the wildfire on the Blackwater, but it was really Tyrion and Cersei and
Helene the Pyromancer and all his other Pyromancer people. Yeah, you wonder at this point if her involvement, because Sala says you're not the first to be saying this, so they must be saying it very quietly.
Right.
Or,
you're also not the first to be in line to get burned.
Right, yes. So you wonder if maybe Melisandre's involvement in burning the traitors in quotations, could be rumor or legend, Things seem to just be a little bit out of control right now, and we don't know who's doing what.
Yeah, true. Stannis seems more and more to be coming round to the religion. We heard before that Queen Selyse was the more pious to this new religion than
right.
Stannis. But if he's spending his whole time in the volcano with Melisandre, it can't just be for the warmth. I mean, it could be for Melisandre. We believe she's very pretty, but it feels like he's definitely coming more and more round to it. At least she's showing him things that are making him believe more and more.
Yeah, certainly seems like it. We went from, in the prologue, him basically telling Crescent he doesn't believe in any of this lore stuff, to using her. He told Davos in the first Davos chapter of A Clash of Kings that he was basically just using her to induce fear from others, not others with a capital O, but other people. And then she, her roles in Renly's death and Courtney Penrose's death clearly would show that he's becoming more of a believer in her ability to handle these things, to now him spending days in a volcano studying flames with her, forsaking his rule.
Yeah. And I mean, I think also when you send a shadow demon to kill your brother, you've really committed at that point. Even if you don't necessarily believe in the religion, there's no way back.
Right. Yes, that's a good point. Yes, that you're pot committed at that point right there.
Right. But Davos is hell-bent on killing her. He's convinced it's a divine task. He mentions that the ship that came and rescued him was blown so far south off its normal path that that's the only reason he was saved, and that was clearly because he has a mission.
Yeah, and Sala mentions the fact that Davos lost his little lucky pouch of his finger bones. And I wonder if possibly part of the reason he feels so confident that his good fortune in being rescued is divine intervention is because he lost his lucky finger bones. And so he doesn't have that to put on the good fortune that he was rescued. So he believes it's divine intervention instead, which also suits his cause better because he really wants revenge for the death of his sons, and he has nowhere to direct it at. So he's directing it entirely at Melisandre. So saying that it's divine, that he was brought back to life to kill her, really helps him with that. Rationalize that anyway.
And the other aspect of his zealotry that's going to backfire is that he's convinced that he's on this divine mission and that he's been rescued for this divine mission. So he poo-poos any attempts to get him to rest and recover from the diseases that he's picked up on this. And so he's going to try and take her on in a state which will probably see him weaker than Crescent was when Crescent attempted and failed, So
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, he's got very little chance of success here. I mean, he knows it. He thinks he saw that Melisandre didn't die when both she and Crescent drank the poison, and Crescent died and she didn't. Of course, Crescent was also very old, so may have just been a constitution thing.
Right. It was actually a very weak poison.
Yes. She was like, there's something a little tangy on my tongue. Yeah, but like you mentioned, Sala points out that he's going to die regardless of success or failure. If he tries, he's going to die one way or the other. If he kills her, they'll burn him for revenge. If he fails, they'll burn him for trying. So it's really a suicide mission.
And you got to think, I mean, he is in a weakened state. If he was thinking a bit more rationally, you've got to plan a bit longer. I mean, get back into the king's good graces. You fought and almost died on the Blackwater. You could be a hero, and you could help to bring Stannis back because he trusts you and cares about you.
That's true.
And if you do that, you could get rid of Melisandre in other ways.
Yeah.
This is a fool's mission he's on.
But as you're saying that, I was just thinking maybe the reason he's rushing to do it so fast is because he's afraid if he sees Devon, he will lose his courage and his drive to do it because he will default to being a father first and foremost and not sacrifice his life to kill Melisandre.
It's a good point, but I mean, you could try to use rational argument over assassination.
True. Yes. You certainly could.
Might work. He also might feel a little bit of guilt of the fact that he was involved in Courtney Penrose's death, and again, he clearly feels some guilt about what he did, blames Melisandre, and absolves Stannis as if Stannis didn't say, "Let's do this."
Right. There's no mention of Stannis's involvement in the whole thing. So he eventually leaves the ship and has a little trouble getting into the castle. We didn't mention this in the summary, but the guard at the castle thinks he's just some loon who's pretending to be Davos Seaworth because they all think Davos died on the Blackwater. But eventually he convinces them and he gets in and he's taken to this garden, Aegon's garden. And while he's waiting there, Patchface and Shireen come by, and Patchface spouts what is seemingly gibberish. Now, remember, Patchface drowned. Stefan Baratheon and his wife, Kasana, they were in Essos. They found Patchface. They were bringing him back. And then the ship sank in Shipbreaker Bay outside of Storm's End. Patchface drowned, but he didn't die. But since he's come back from that, he's, he talks a lot of nonsense. And so he stops, he's running, he stops, looks at Davos and says, "Fool's blood, king's blood, blood on the maiden's thigh, but chains for the guests and chains for the bridegroom, I. Now, we can't discuss this any much further because...
Interjection, please, Mackelly. We can't discuss it much further. You can't discuss it much further for the reason you're about to say. I can't discuss it much further because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, I'll just say that the rereaders who recall what they read more than within the past week likely know what he's getting at. And, so, it's one of the tricky parts of the spoiler-free aspect of our show, which I very strongly believe in, is that we can't talk about how things tie into other events in the future. So we have to wait and talk about how something was referenced or set up or predicted in the past.
I tell you what, Mackelly, when that prophecy, because it definitely has the smell of prophecy to it, I can see that, comes to pass, I want you to remind me of this day, because I really have no idea what we're talking about here. I have a sort of a suspicion, but I don't know. I really don't know what that's about.
Well, I will say I will do that for you right now with something that Patchface said before that is possible was prophetic. Not pathetic, but prophetic.
Prophetic, go on.
Yes. We didn't mention it at the time, mostly because I really kind of forgot. But now that we've got Patchface and Davos lamenting about Davos's role in Courtney Penrose's death, seems like a good time to mention his ramblings from the prologue of A Clash of Kings.
Okay.
He was heard multiple times singing the following: "The shadows come to dance, my lord, dance, my lord, dance, my lord. The shadows come to stay, my lord, stay, my lord, stay, my lord." Now, one possible interpretation of the reference to the shadows is the assassinations of Renly and Courtney Penrose, by Melisandre's birthed shadow assassins. So that's possibly what he was getting at in the prologue there, that shadows. The stay, my lord part, it's also Another possibility of this, and I can't remember if we discussed it at the time in the prologue, that was a long time ago, is the others. They're often referred to as shadows as well. So, But we've since seen literal, in these Davos Stannis chapters, we've seen literal shadows assassinate people.
Interesting. All right, well, thanks. We get to meet Edric Storm finally. He's been a character who's been bounced around. Seems like a good and sweet kid. I mean, initially he complained that Davos shouldn't get in his way when he's running, but when he hears Davos coughing, he's worried about him and wants to get him a maester and shows compassion, and also about the cutting off of the fingers, thinks it was incommensurate with his crimes. So, but also there's also a sort of pride in his father, which is interesting. And I wonder if that was instilled in him at Storm's End by Penrose, because he didn't know. He did know his father quite well, didn't he? Because his father used to visit him fairly regularly. Yeah,
that's what he says here. Yes, his father came to visit every name day and gave him a miniature warhammer, just like his.
And it's the other thing that's interesting to me about that is there's this sense of Robert liking this kid more than his own kids being not his own kids and all.
There might be something there that he subconsciously is like, these kids are too much like my wife and I can't stand her. You know who else they remind me of? That brother-in-law of mine.
But I like that big-eared kid down in Storm's End. He's cool.
It feels like Courtney Penrose was hell-bent on guarding Edric against Stannis acquiring him, as if he expected that Stannis might do the boy harm in some way. But, I mean, we only see him for a few minutes here, but he seems pretty safe.
Do we know Edric Storm's route to Dragonstone? Was he at the battle and was one of the ones shipped away, or was he sent to Dragonstone to hang out with Melisandre while the battle raged?
I believe is the latter.
But that's interesting, because one of the things we theorized was that he was going to be paraded in King's Landing as an example of what a Baratheon child should look like. But that clearly was not part of the plan.
Yes.
Or at least not the initial plan.
At least not the initial plan.
Yeah, they could have done it later, that's true.
Yeah. But so one of the last things Davos thinks before Axel Florent and his men show up is that Edric is like Robert, but also like Renly, which made him nervous. And I spent a lot of time this week thinking exactly why did it make him nervous? Is it fear that he's likable and personable in a way that Stannis isn't, and fears Stannis will recognize that and consider him a threat?
Possibly. Or, if Edric is like Renly and grows up to be ambitious, that he might claim things himself.
Right.
Sort of.
Yeah, so kind of the opposite of what I'm saying.
But yeah, I think it's the sense that this could cause danger in the future for the Baratheon claims to the throne, that it might murky the waters.
It's something along those lines is why it makes
But
him
also,
nervous.
there's just the general, Renly was just a little impetuous and maybe misused his power a little bit in some ways. I mean, that's kind of harsh, but he never had a claim to the throne, and he brought an army together to push a false claim. But that's everybody else's fault. Everybody else's fault. They should have all said no,
Elena Tyrell was on board with that plan. Just say no. He has no claim.
Me and Olenna Tyrell, the voices of reason in Westeros.
Right.
So Axel Florent, not Alester Florent, arrives and takes Davos to sends Davos to the dungeons because he meant to use his knife on Our Lady. How could they have known that?
Right. As I see, there's three possible options.
Okay.
One being that Salladhor Saan alerted them to protect Davos from actually making an attempt, figuring it's better if he at least doesn't actually try and gets put in a dungeon and maybe cools off a bit. Seems unlikely, though, because he would have had men sent right behind Davos to get a message delivered in time, and then, in time to do anything useful here.
Yeah.
Plus, it's extremely dangerous.
Right.
Because we know what happens to traitors.
Right, yes. You're sending your friend to a dungeon from which he's unlikely to return. You know?
Right.
And possibly bringing the eye of Sauron down on you as well.
Yes.
Why didn't you stop him? You know?
Yes, so that doesn't seem like the leading option.
So I'm stealing your theories here, but a queen spy overheard Davos talking. He was talking on a Lysene ship, so there shouldn't be too many Florents or, Relor loyalists there, but not impossible. I mean, like I said, I thought I was pretty convinced that whatever he said on the ships was going to get back. So
yeah,
this is definitely a possibility.
And then the third option is that Melisandre saw it coming in the flames and sent Axel to intervene.
I have a fourth option, which is simply that he was carrying a knife and they've decided that that's what he was going to do and they're just dragging him off to the dungeon.
It's become that type of place where everyone is is considered doing something.
Do we know for a fact that Axel Florent was referring to Melisandre? Does he follow that up?
He only says Our Lady. So he could have been talking
Selyse.
About
Selyse, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing you see. I think it's maybe just a matter of this is an unfamiliar face in Dragonstone. He's going to the dungeon,
Sure.
Which is possibly the best news for Davos, that one, because there's a chance he'll get out,
Right.
Once news reaches Stannis that Davos is back, he might say, I want to see him,
Yes, that's true. That's true.
We can but hope. Do you have some background for us?
I do indeed. So, Salladhor Saan is a Lysene pirate, as is Corain Sathmantes, the captain of Sheala's Dance, the ship that rescued Davos. In fact, it was Davos who sailed to Lys to recruit Saan to Stannis' cause in the first place. And Salladhor Saan's flagship of his fleet of striped galleys is called Valyrian. So, why does a man from Lys have a ship named after the famed and now dead capital city of the Valyrian Freehold? Well, the short answer might be that Lys was originally a colony of the Valyrian Freehold. In fact, because of the island of Lys's desirable climate, it became a posh vacation destination for the dragon lords of Valyria. Lys is known to have ample sunshine, is fertile, dotted with fruit trees and palm trees, and surrounded by beautiful waters filled with sea life, hence the nickname anyway, Lys the Lovely. And one other thing I wanted to mention about Lys, or Lys, I'm never sure which way it's actually pronounced. I go back and forth kind of, is you'll see two different spellings in the text of the Song of Ice and Fire books. There's Lyseni, which in my mind is Lyseni, and Lysene, which in my mind is Lysene.
Yeah.
Lyseni tends to be used as a noun, and Lysene as an adjective. Lyseni, noun, Lysene, adjective.
Yes, I can see that. Although I might put an extra syllable on the end of Lysene. I might make that Lysene. So Lyseni and Lysene. But I think yours is better. Yours is a better way of doing it. I'm just explaining what goes on in my fevered mind. Well, thanks for that. Comparison with the television show, the conversation with Salladhor takes place on the ship at sea in the TV show. Basically, it's as if Salladhor rescued him. There's no sort of intermediate ship.
Okay.
But the conversation is not dissimilar. When Davos reaches Dragonstone, he is granted immediate access to Stannis and Melisandre. He blames her directly to her face for the failure at the Blackwater. She blames him for, not unreasonably, convincing Stannis to leave her at home. He loses his temper and attacks her, and is then dragged off to the dungeons. So,
either way, he ends up in the dungeon.
Exactly, but certainly with reason here for sure.
Right. Yes.
Just while I'm talking about comparison with the television show, you know that I go hunting for this chapter in the TV show. It does mean I missed some of the big picture of the TV show, and I noticed while I was looking for this that I saw a whole scene where Robb Stark and Roose Bolton arrive in Harrenhal, which has been abandoned by Tywin Lannister. Yeah. And he left behind 200 dead Northmen. Basically, they murdered everyone from the dungeons and left them all dead. And Roose and Robb arrive, and they're kind of like, everyone's mad about it. And Rickard Karstark is complaining about, will there be any revenge for these dead Northerners?
Okay.
But that's how Harrenhal changes hands. So Robb is actually present for that.
Oh, all right. Good stuff. Yeah.
Pedantry Corner. I think you spotted the good one.
I'll set it up for you. When Salladhor meets Davos, he fails to believe that he is. He refuses to believe he's real. He thinks he's a ghost, and he says, "You must be. The Davos I knew was never so thin or so pale as you." And I thought, he's been marooned on a rock in a bay for weeks. I can't imagine him being very pale.
Yes, I think your use of the word maroon is very apt. He would have been marooned, right. Stuck on an island for that long. And certainly in the TV show, he's red and blistered. His skin is peeling off.
That's what I would expect.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. So news and notes. We are looking forward. I mean, this will have happened in the past by the time you hear this. Oh no, this won't. Actually, this will be just about contemporary, right? I mean,
it'll be That's right. Yes, we're recording it beforehand. It'll be released the next morning after.
Right. So we're going to have a chat with our Buy Me a Coffee sustainers after we've all watched the first episode of House of the Dragon on HBO, which is very exciting. I can't wait.
It sure is. Yes, and that's really most of the news this. Consuming this week is we're recording on Saturday, and tomorrow on Sunday is the big premiere of Dance of the Dragons, which we're all very excited for.
Yeah, and I'll take this small one so you can have the big one. So the small one is thanks to everyone for giving us positive ratings on Spotify. We're now in second place in the rates for Song of Ice and Fire podcasts, mostly 5-star ratings. So thank you, everyone.
Yep, we have the most of any A Song of Ice and Fire podcast with a 5.0 rating. We're second overall, but the one who's in front of us does not have a 5.0 rating. So keep up the great work. We're so thankful and so appreciative.
Beautiful.
And then, so I missed this. A listener named Kat left a really nice review on our YouTube 50th episode special that we did with Molly emceeing. Yeah. So the comment goes like this: "Hey guys, I just found your podcast a few weeks ago and I love it. I started rereading the books in English actually for the first time and found your podcast on a streaming platform along with a bunch of others with the same topic. For my ears, you two have by far the most pleasant voices, and the balance between summary, background information, jokes, and personal stories is exactly how I like it, while refreshing my English every day in traffic. Thank you very much, and nice to put faces with the voices now."
Of course, you would have seen us for the first time in that YouTube video. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, thank you, Kat. That's awesome. And can I just say one more time to everyone who is not born in a family where you learn English as a first language, that I am in awe of your ability to learn a second language, because I would love to be able to speak a second language.
Oh, me too.
Can't.
Oh, yes.
I cannot. I can't imagine trying to read a book in a second language.
Oh, I know. And listening to us jibber jabber as we do, so unprofessionally so. Yes.
All right, let's conclude. So Davos' obsession with Melisandre is affecting how he sees her. His point of view is definitely askew.
And like you said at the very beginning, after the summary, is our feelings on Melisandre being manipulated by Davos's point of view.
Well,
that he's got us possibly thinking she is a monster. But maybe if we had her point of view, we would see that she's doing things for a very rational, logical reason, and maybe is being misunderstood for whatever reason.
Yeah, but the whole singing while the traitors are marched into the flames.
Not a good look. Not a good look.
Good look. Now, again, we didn't see it firsthand. It was a secondhand report.
Yes.
Could be very much like Renly's ghost.
Yes, that is true, yes.
She might have been like, no, you burn statues, not people, for all we know.
Yeah, that was the singing. It was her shouting, no, this is not how we do things around here.
She defaulted back to her first language for this because she was such a panic. It sounded like singing to them.
Right.
So what happens to Davos now? Precedent isn't good. People in those dungeons tend to get very hot very soon.
Yes.
But his relationship with Stannis might save him.
What about Devon as a Stannis' squire? Maybe that could maybe factor one way or another. Or possibly his mental state. Could he be deemed temporarily insane? Yeah. And, that he was dehydrated and sick and fevered. And maybe they'll excuse it some.
I gotta say, if I'm Devon, I'm distancing myself. Don't blame me for that guy.
Seaworth? My last name's not Seaworth. But Stannis is off staring at the flames, leaving rule up to Selyse and Alester and Melisandre. Not that there's much left to rule, really, at this point. It's basically just Dragonstone and a few other rocks in the bay.
Few piles of charred bones. They're burning people alive, and you've got to imagine that's got to be alienating some of the people who stayed. I mean, if you stayed loyal to Stannis through all this, you've been pretty loyal, and to see some of you get burned for it, doesn't feel great.
I mean, it could come back. Well, it could come back to burn Stannis and Alester. Terrible way to make a pun there,
yeah,
but
that's good though. Yeah.
But yes, I mean, you're already got a very diminished loyal base here. Last thing you want to do is be alienating people and burning people alive. I mean, in general, you don't want to be doing that. But you're also possibly alienating the final few loyalists you have left alive.
And whilst they may have the biggest fleet on the seas right now, the Red Wine fleet is supposedly coming to King's Landing, and when that arrives, they won't have any fleet on the seas, because the only way to survive that will be to flee.
Yes, exactly. Doesn't seem like there'd be much of a fight to put up. The Lannisters, Tywin, I believe, told Tyrion that they were just waiting for the Lannister fleet to come around before they sieged Dragonstone. When that happens, I mean, the jig is up. You got to run or you're going to die, one or the other.
I agree. Okay, so there's 3 ways that you could help us. You can leave us a positive review. We are grateful for all of them. You can buy some merchandise at ghostsofharrenhal.threadless.com, or you can buy us a cup of Arbor Gold at buymeacoffee.com/ghostsharrenhal. Become a Lord Paramount or Knight of the Realm Sustainer, and you'll keep us going for longer. And thanks to those who have already become sustainers.
Absolutely. And as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhal@gmail.com. You can go out and follow us on Twitter at @ghostharrenhal. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, Discord, and YouTube.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.